Hi, my name's John, and we're going to talk a little bit about comping today. So with comping, it's a very deep art. There's a lot that goes into it, but I want to show you some kind of basic stuff that kind of gets you started and gets you thinking about how comping works. So when we comp, we're trying to interact with the soloist or the rhythm section, and we're trying to kind of create music with them. So it's very much a listening art. And within that listening art, it kind of requires us to have a degree of independence to be able to sort of use our limbs to accentuate what other soloists are doing. But what's important is I don't like to think about about independence as, oh, my left hand's doing this while my right hand's doing this. I like to see the entire whole. And so I'm going to kind of show you some rhythms that can kind of help you to start thinking in that sort of idiom. So the first sort of basic comping rhythm I love to show students is the and of one and the and of three. And I call it filling in the holes because the and of one and the and of three, if you look at the swing pattern, 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1. The and of one and the and of three, the ride cymbal isn't playing. So it's quite simple to add that in. So as you can see, it's, then you're not thinking so much as like, oh, my limbs have to do this and this. It's you're thinking that whole, the whole as far as like both the whole in the sense of the and of one and the three and the whole, what you're doing with the drum set. So another rhythm I like to show after that is the and of two and the and of four. So it's the other, upbeats in the measure. And I also like to think because they kind of are a family, the 2 and 4 and 1 and 3. I kind of see them as kind of two sides of the same coin, because as far as what you're playing feels similar, it's just where it is in the measure. So the and of 2 and 4, if what we want to think about is where does that meet with? So that meets with that middle note in that swing pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1. Now that's a great rhythm, especially the and of four to end phrases. So I'll kind of show you just for example, kind of breaking up the time, doing my thing, but accenting that and of two and and of four. Now that we have those kind of basic upbeats, what I like to do is I like to put them together. So it's important, you can take these sort of isolated things and you can try and experiment with them and do different things. So like, for example, we have these two bass core rhythms and it's like, well, what does it sound like if we put them together? So it sounds a little something like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that sounds pretty cool. What you want to do though too is you don't want to always be playing just that. So you can do that for like, a couple beats or, however you feel like. But it's kind of a nice sort of momentum thing because we're doing that syncopation where the upbeat is being accented. So that kind of creates rhythmic excitement. Now another thing, another rhythm, comping rhythm I like to show people early on is sort of what we call the jazz shuffle or the Blakey shuffle. So kind of like our previous lesson, we were talking about the blues shuffle, but now instead of playing the blues shuffle in our right hand, we're going to play it in our left hand while we play the ride cymbal pattern. What's important to sort of know about this is you want to accent the 2 and 4, and you want your every other note to be really quiet, because if you're with the snare drum being this busy, if it's too loud, it can really easily overpower the band. So now what I kind of want to show you is with a couple of these different comping rhythms we just showed is how we can take different ideas out of them. So I want to start with that and of 1, and of 2, and of 3, and of 4. So what we can do now is we can also play these rhythms on the bass drum. So for example, if I'm just using the bass drum, it would sound like this. So that's a cool way, you know, to kind of take one idea and do a different thing with it. What I like to do with this rhythm too is use groups of two, so two snare drums and two bass drums. So it'll sound something a little like this. Now that I find a little bit more musically viable and useful because there's a sort of difference in timbres, and so it doesn't sound as crowded because you're using different sound sources. Um, Another way we can kind of take another one of these rhythms, the shuffle rhythm, is we can take little bits of it. So I like to think about that and of 3 to 4. So what I like to do, this is a comping rhythm I use a lot. It goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's kind of based on that blues shuffle again. We're accenting that 4, but instead we're using the bass drum. Now this is a great kind of Philly Joe inspired thing, and it's great, it's sort of up tempo. So I'm going to kind of demonstrate, you know, just doing regular comping and using that as kind of a resolution phrase. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So with this, we're kind of orchestrating it in a different way. And this is one way you can take these sort of, even just these couple ideas, you can make infinite combinations and possibilities of ideas when you add dynamics, timbre, you know, orchestration. All these things are super important. And now, kind of, but when we're talking in a musical context, you know, we're not necessarily going to think like, okay, I'm going to do 2 snare drums, 2 bass drums, all this sort of stuff. This is kind of where it kind of, the tricky thing is like developing that sort of coordination to where you can kind of just do it in a musical context. But I want to kind of talk a little bit about that. So what we call a lot of this, we could call it like question and answer. So for example, the way I kind of think about playing is like my snare drum will play a question, then my bass drum will answer. So I'll kind of demonstrate a little bit of that. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So musicians that are great to check out this kind of style of comping are drummers like Philly Joe Jones and Billy Higgins and a lot of the bebop players. And this is a great place, sort of starting point to where you can kind of develop that sort of basic coordination, and you can start playing, you know, comping lines that are interesting and help build up the soloist. And again, it's super important to listen because we want to make sure our comping is complementary, not detrimental to the rest of the music listening experience.